Welcome to the final episode of In Search of Civility for 2021. I'm Luke Malek, and I'm here with my co-hosts, former legislator from Pocatello, Kelley Packer, who's now the director of the Association of Idaho Cities, and former House Minority Leader Matt Erpelding, now director of government affairs for Micron. Former Ada County Commissioner Diana Lacchiando could not join us today, unfortunately. If this is your first time joining us, let me offer some background on our show, In Search of Civility. The series is a partnership between the Association of Idaho Cities, my law firm, Smith and Malek, and the Boise Metro Chamber. We started this series in January of 2021, just days after the violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol laid bare the consequences and challenges of becoming such a polarized nation. Since then, we've tackled topics ranging from the public lands to CRT, the limits to political protests that threaten the private property rights of elected officials, and of course, the right way to respond to the pandemic. We're deeply grateful to the special guests who joined us to converse civilly on deeply controversial issues over the years. In Search of Civility could not have been produced without the support of our presenting sponsors, and we're very grateful to them. Dawson Taylor Coffee Roasters and the Idaho Central Credit Union. Additionally, thanks to our sponsors, Power Engineers and Ørsted Architects. Their support is critical to expanding our ability to reach new audiences about civility issues in public discourse. Finally, thank you to our media partners, Idaho Ed News, the Idaho Statesman, and the Idaho Press. They provide us with a platform and audience with whom we can interact. Today, we're going to reflect on the past year and how our country and communities in Idaho have changed or not changed when it comes to constructive dialogue and expanding the democratic process. As we go through our discussion, we would love to hear from you in our social media channels so we can incorporate your thoughts into our discussion. And you can see on the screen joining us now, Matt, who's in Manassas, Virginia, I think, and Kelley, who is recovering from surgery as we talk. So if you see her winking at you, we joked around, she's not making a pass at anybody in the audience. She's just recovering from eye surgery. So thank you both for being here today, and we're excited to start this conversation. And we've come a long way since the three of us met in December 2020 to talk about this. Let's talk about why each of us was inspired to volunteer our time to this project. Do you want to start that out, Matt?
Sure. When Kelley asked us to come over to the Association of Cities, I just thought I was going to get a free lunch. And she pitched this idea that we would start to have conversations, broad-based conversations in a bipartisan way about issues surrounding civility in Idaho and nationwide. And immediately it piqued my interest. It didn't just pique my interest because we had all served together and watched the legislature over time increasingly polarize and become less and less interested in the civil nature. But I think even more broadly, many of us in the legislature are friends. And as a result of those common bonds, those trial by fire, you might say, even if we disagreed, we could still be friendly. But in the public eye, there's a level of incivility right now that does make me uncomfortable. And I hoped that throughout the year of having uncomfortable conversations, critical conversations, whatever you want to call them, where we involve multiple views from the perspective of reasonable people can disagree, that we would bring together and begin to kind of demonstrate through role modeling and through conversation that civility is critical to solving our nation's problems. And more locally, civility is critical to solving Idaho's problems. So I was more than happy to eat the free lunch. I think I ate Luke's as well. But I also was very interested in the broader process of creating a conversation around civility for the long haul.
And Kelley, this was really your idea. So what inspired you?
Well, as Matt should know by now, there's never a free lunch, right? So you got some food, but I was absolutely making an ask, right? I just have been heartsick the last year or two, going on 3, I guess now, as I've watched how people's interaction with each other, even on a day-to-day basis, not even necessarily in politics, but even more so there. But just in general, people have gotten so much more angry and ugly with each other. And I just don't understand it. It breaks my heart, literally. I think of the interaction I've had even here at my HOA has been less than friendly. People have lost sight of the fact that the person across from you in any discussion is still a person. They're a human that has the same insecurities and dreams and wishes of wanting to succeed and mean something in this world. And we dismiss others' opinions. We dismiss others entirely with such ease anymore that it just is unreal to me. I don't understand it. And I hope that in some small measure, In Search of Civility and the other things that we're all involved in can help change that environment. It needs to stop. We need to get back to the days when we recognize right from wrong, and we recognize being kind, even when we disagree with others, especially when we disagree with others. And so that was my motivation. Is I thought there's got to be a way for us to start shining a spotlight on the good, but also on the bad behavior, and modeling better behavior and showing people how they can do better in their conversations with others. So that was really the motivation for me, and one that it still drives me.
Yeah, and for me, just chime in as to why I got involved, and it really boils down to that last point that you were making, Kelley, which is it really does involve leadership in order to make change. And we have so many difficult topics to face and so many different ways of looking at the issues that we are facing. We've had a lot of conversations, even over our time doing this webcast, over doing the show In Search of Civility, about what civility means. Is it a tool for dialogue, or is it a tool to tamp down minority opinions and that kind of stuff? And I so firmly believe that we need leaders that are willing to create a venue where all voices can be heard. And the only way to do that is to have people that are willing to have those conversations, bring in people that feel very, very strongly about different topics, and have those conversations back and forth, and be able to say, well, here's one perspective, and then here's the other perspective. Because if it becomes ad hominem attacks and just coming to platitudes and angry words, you're never going to get to the heart of the issue that is really having an impact on people's quality of life and their ability to express themselves.
You know, we did 12 shows now, maybe 11. We might have skipped 1 month. I think it was like a holiday. But during that time, we had a lot of different conversations. And one of the things we wanted to review is kind of what were your highlights, and which conversation did you think had the most impact on you personally and potentially on the community at large? And so, Luke, we'll start with you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think it was really amazing to me when we had Alana Rubel. There were several episodes that really stuck out, but when we had Representative Alana Rubel and Representative Judy Boyle, who really represent very, very different points of view, very, very different spectrums of the political realm, and really different ways of looking at the issue which we had them on, which was talking about public lands and those public resources. That was such a respectful conversation. Alana talked about how Representative Rubel talked about how Representative Boyle came and brought flowers and chocolates, I think, to Representative Rubel's bedside after she had some severe burns, and just really treating each other like human beings, but also able to sit and have a conversation about two very disparate aspects of that. And the other one that really stuck out to me was when we really did take on what, the most overpowering issue that has really come up other than the pandemic, which is critical race theory, and had our guests on talking about that. I think those were really two areas where we really excelled in showing that having a civil dialogue can really allow a dialogue to flourish.
Kelley, what was yours?
Luke touched on the one that really came to mind for me, which was the one with Representative Horman and Representative Matthias on the critical race theory. I was very impressed with both of them. They were able to bring some salient points, their points of view to the conversation, but they did it in such a respectful manner. And I left that conversation understanding that issue better, because it was one I had never even heard of before, right? But also recognizing the important aspects of both sides of that conversation, and really appreciated how they modeled such graciousness and respect as each person gave their points and listened to the other's point of view. The other one that really stood out for me, and even though he was singular on the show with us and didn't have the opposite viewpoint represented, Congressman Simpson, when he shared his salmon plan, talked about the long road ahead, right? And that he recognized that there was a lot of different stakeholder groups, as well as his colleagues that were on the opposite side of that, and it was a long row that he was going to have to hoe, but he was willing to take that challenge on. And during the conversation, he didn't disparage anyone. He just thoughtfully laid out his plan and the reason why it was important, and still recognized that there were others that have serious concerns that need to be worked through, and he was committed to working through those. So just really applaud both of those conversations.
Hey, Matt, I think you should answer that same question, but I would also like the audience to share if they have in the comments their favorite moments as well. So, but Matt, I would love to hear your thoughts on what your favorite discussion was and why.
I would agree. The three that you picked, so Ilana Rubel and Representative Boyle, Representative Foreman, Representative Mathias, and then certainly Congressman Simpson were the three that stand out to me. But I want to point out that something else that was a highlight for me wasn't necessarily the shows, but some of the comments, both good and bad. Here we had a show that was rooted in civility, designed to have difficult conversations, and yet exhibited in the comments were both sides of that polarization. People who were really respectful and then people who were just awful. And that is where I realized, it's not just in our politics, it's in our home life. And when we talk about civility, it isn't just about what are we doing on a public level, but what are we doing all the way down to our home, and how are we making sure that we engage in a process that is civil in our relationships, in our friendships. And that includes things like forgiveness, being sure to give the person the benefit of the doubt. And when you look at social media, I just think that this entire year has illustrated to me that social media may be part of the problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So Matt, do you think our show is making an impact?
Well, it's kind of like if you throw a penny in a pond, right? So if you throw a penny in a pond, it makes a little wave, but maybe there's ripple effects, and those ripple effects might be more broad brushed. I do think that these conversations need to be had. They need to be had at a local level. They need to be had at a national level. We need to have conversations about challenges within our media. And there's no better place to start than where we can. And so the four of us came together with an idea. We've had great viewership throughout the process. We've had a lot of great guests, and I think it's a tribute to both of you and Diana's relationships with other elected officials. I think it is a tribute to the fact that everyone, I think, that is inside of the arena recognizes that there is a polarization and a civility problem. Whether or not there's a measurable impact, I think that this is just the beginning. And to really make an impact, this type of stuff needs to continue to happen over the years. We need to continue to find ways to expand our voice and increase our viewership. And hopefully over time we have impact. But I think we're not in a better place nationally than we were on January 6th. And that has to do with maybe not just incivility, but just the concept of identifying fact versus fiction, and then identifying whose fact is a fact and whose fiction is a fiction. I just think that there's so much going on that we have a lot of work to do, but I do think that folks who have served and folks who are engaged in public discourse have a responsibility to keep doing this kind of work, because otherwise there is no voice. The best example is look at what has happened to Congresswoman Lynn Cheney. She spoke up, she was honest. She's been heavily marginalized, and now there's even concern that she won't win her congressional race, which I don't agree with Congresswoman Cheney on virtually any policy matter, but I do think she's a person who's ethical, and I think that she is probably the more public symptom of what's happening nationally.
Kelley, that's a good. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I couldn't agree more. I think that that what Matt said is spot on. I think that we maybe can't even realize what effect, if any, we've had personally, but I think continuing these conversations is the only way we'll make a difference. One of the things that I wish more people would recognize is the danger of blanket statements. Just because you don't agree with somebody or understand maybe where they're coming from, you have a different view of a policy issue or whatever the conversation might be around, it doesn't make that other person evil. It doesn't make that other person dishonest. Your assumptions and my assumptions, I think, are what gets in the way a lot of times. If we would just take the time to sit down and talk and seek to understand. I mean, we've all heard that before, but one of the things I've recently learned that I think has been really helpful is when we go into a conversation, if we would take the time to think of three things. First, I don't know everything, right? Remind yourself, I do not know everything. I can't tell you. I mean, when I started as a city councilwoman, I got involved because I thought certain things were being done that shouldn't be done, and I was going to fix it. And I got there and found out that what they were doing was actually spot on, really smart. I did fall in love with it and was able to affect change in some other ways. And so I ended up in this arena, the political arena, and I'm glad. But the same thing at the legislature. I came there thinking I was going to clean it up, right? And then you get there and you learn and you find out things that you didn't know. So reminding yourself, I may not know everything. I may be mistaken in what I do know, because like Matt talked about facts, people can have their own opinions, but they can't have their own facts. We might be mistaken in what we think is actually happening or being said or done, or someone else's attention. And the third thing is recognizing that others might have good ideas. If we could approach all conversations with those three things in mind, we'd be more open, and I think we'd be more accepting, and we'd actually find more thoughtful solutions. But when we think our way is the only way, and anybody that doesn't agree with us is evil, we're the ones in the wrong, and we're the ones that are helping to spread the divisiveness that people are concerned with.
That's well said. And for my part, I don't have a lot to add because I think you guys nailed it well. I mean, there's definitely challenges that we're facing, right? We can't change the national dialogue, but man, I do think that we see some of the comments right now as we're going along coming in from our Facebook viewers that there is an impact that we're making in people's ability to understand that there are people dedicated to having a dialogue here. So your analogy is apt, Matt. It's like a penny in a pond. We are making a difference where we can.
We're going to be moving to next year. And as we move to next year, we're starting to think about what should we be talking about? How should we be engaging the community and at what level? So I thought I'd ask you two here, what do you think? What should we be talking about in the next year, especially as we go into an election cycle in Idaho? And we'll start with you, Luke.
Yeah, no, I think we have some major policy issues that are going to be coming along. We have in May of next year, we have primary elections coming along. And I think that we could have a unique role with this group to have an impact at making sure that some of the dialogue that's happening around those elections is really based in fact around policy, right? Because there's one of my personal issues is just kind of this extremist politics and how it takes a non-issue, turns it into an issue, and then turns it into a fundraising project or a policy issue. And I think that we could have a really strong voice in saying what is the real debate on around here. And if we could get guests on that could help inform our viewers as to what the issues are that are really being debated, rather than letting the election politics dictate what people are hearing, I think we could have a real impact there.
Kelley?
I agree. I think that's really important. What better time to focus on elections and the actual policy discussions that sometimes get skewed, right? When you've got a moderator that maybe is channeling the conversation in a certain way. But I think in addition to those election topics and maybe having some of the candidates on to share their points of view and their positions, but in a civil manner and modeling that good behavior again, which is what we always hope for. I think one of the things I like that we did this year is we tried to alternate it with some other discussions around tools that the everyday person can use, whether it's with their family or whether it's in the workplace. So I'd like to still see some of those things happen, as well as highlighting the election topics and races that are happening. How about you, Matt?
I think we got to go to a broader discussion around media. And, we wouldn't have been successful here if our media partners hadn't allowed us to broadcast this. It certainly helps our reach and it helps our engagement. At the same time, I think we have to talk about the role of the media in polarization and the transition from a fact-based 100% to the blurring of the lines between the commentary field and true news. And I really think that conversation has to be a piece here, because the commentary seems to have overridden the news, and the news is what is valuable because it is what presents people with an opportunity to make a choice. It presents people with the critical thinking methods to determine which way is which, whereas commentary is designed to lead a horse to water. So if you want to lead a horse to water in this issue, then you write your commentary in that way. And I think it's problematic on the whole if commentary is overshadowing what has been traditional news outlets. Add the polarization and the politicization of news within our political leaders, and you create a really toxic environment, because then it's about picking sides even with your news organizations. So I would really appreciate seeing some reporters on and really having that honest conversation of what is causing the blurring of the lines, and why is it so hard to find facts that can help you make a reasonable decision, even if it may differ from the one that I might come up with.
Great idea.
We're getting a few comments online. Don says, I would love to see legislators involved in their districts, not just at election years or for party events. Get involved in schools, cities, counties, etc. And I don't know, that's maybe a place where we could help highlight how legislators are doing that, or encourage them, or talk to them about what efforts they're making. And then Lorraine says, I agree that policy-based decision-making and policy-driven conversations will help overcome divisiveness. And I think that's what we've been saying as well, which is if we focus on the facts, it's so much easier to overcome this emotional drive that we have. And, in the past years, our country and the communities in Idaho have changed a lot just in the past year since we started this. How do you guys view it as having changed when it comes to constructive dialogue or expanding the democratic process in Idaho? Have you seen changes? Kelley?
Yeah, I actually think it made it worse. This that the virtual world that we've lived in for basically the last 2 years, while it's allowed things to continue, it's allowed progress to still take place, and us to be able to still meet and make decisions that need to keep things moving forward. It has made it easier for us to be disjointed and disconnected from each other. While I'm grateful that virtual meetings can get me places that I've never been before, and it can help accelerate even, which is not always a good thing, but can help accelerate the actual interaction with people, I think it has really added to the toxic environment that we've felt. It's pretty hard when you're sitting in the same room with someone to throw, maybe the barbs or viciousness that we have seen escalate over the last little bit. I think it's really hard to do that when you're in the same room with the person, and or participation wanes, right? It's easy for me if I'm on a video Zoom call with a bunch of people to just not participate, turn off my camera, and they don't even know if I'm even in the meeting, right? They think I'm there, but I might not be. I think it's made it worse, in my own opinion.
How about you, Matt? What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think that yes, I agree with Kelley that in some cases the digital world has made it worse. Again, I am worried about the way people feel that freedom of speech means they can write hurtful things all over the place. That's a really big challenge that we have to overcome. And all I can hope is that the next generation, which is raised with things like social media, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, you name it, that they become more able to discern right from wrong on those virtual platforms and behave more appropriately than, say, Generation X and baby boomers have over the years. That being said, I also think that there have been some positive things that have come out over the last year. In the Idaho legislature, our ethics committee that the three of us were involved in putting in place has borne out to show that it does hold people responsible. It's not pretty, but it works. And kudos to the Idaho legislature for doing the right thing. Now, it also shows where our floor is, right? Like, who knows what else is happening? And this is where we are drawing the line. But it's a start in terms of saying we have some general expectations for elected officials, and we're going to hold them accountable. The other plus of the year was, and those of you that know, when I was in politics, I was always all over Secretary of State Denny's placemat because I was always taking a Democrat-Republican swing. But you have to give his office credit. His office was investigated and was accused of election fraud in Idaho. They did their research and they pushed back even on their own party and said, there's absolutely no evidence in Idaho of election fraud. And I think that expands across the country. And so I think, there are people that are stepping up and saying, here's the truth, here's the facts, even with the blowback that comes with that. Whether it be Secretary of State Rathenberg in Georgia or Lawrence Denny in Idaho, there are a lot of people that are speaking truth to power. And I think we need to acknowledge those folks, and we need to recognize that it's uncomfortable because they know they're going to get that blowback. I also think that the relationship between Governor Little and Mayor McLean, and how Governor Little has handled the statewide issues around COVID, while also supporting his mayors at a local level, that has not been the case in other states. And so there are some good things in Idaho that are happening. Now, I don't think necessarily we have anything to do with that, but I want to point out that there are good things that are happening in Idaho. But I think that our communities are where the work needs to take place. Yes, we can continue to encourage lawmakers and other leaders to demonstrate good behavior, but it needs to be occurring at the family level. Because what my worry is those folks that are writing some of these crazy things and outlying inappropriate things on Facebook may also be teaching that stuff to their children, and talk about planting roots and creating some spawn there. That's extremely problematic, and I don't know the solution for that. All I know is that I see a problem down the road.
Great point.
Yeah, well, it's my question, and I know it's a hard one to ask because we all have our anecdotes. The aggregate of anecdote is not data, but the anecdotes that I have are that there is some things that we can be very hopeful about. And that just comes from my talking to our neighbors here in Idaho about what they want the future to look like. There's not very many people that I know that really want to see things get worse in terms of our dialogue, in terms of the acrimony, in terms of the divisiveness that we're seeing. I think generally people want to live in a place where they could be happy. And I think that's why I'm a little bit intrigued by your idea about talking about the media, Matt, in terms of what is the media driving? Is it driving this addiction where people are so addicted to the divisiveness that they can't walk away from it? And what is it that we can do about that? And so I think we have some really important things that we can talk about as we move into the next year, as we move into 2022. And Matt, we've talked about changing the program format slightly, and I think we'd love to hear from our audience as well. But do either of you, Matt or Kelley, have an idea of some format changes that we might be seeing coming up in 2022?
Well, I think we should all thank Diana Lacciando for the last year. She's gotten a new job. She's working incredibly hard, and she doesn't have time for next year's forum, but we will have her on as a guest, guaranteed. But so one format change is Diana won't be back. We are currently hiring for a new volunteer. The pay is nothing and you will volunteer a ton of your time, but we're looking for somebody on the Democratic side to match up with Kelley and Luke. So that's a format change. But I think the other thing is, I think that what we want to do is really move to a place where we have plenty of time to advertise. We have plenty of time to line things up. And so probably a bi-monthly schedule and maybe digging in even deeper to some of these issues that we've kind of scraped the surface on. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kelley.
No, I was just going to echo that. I really do want Diana to know how great it has been to work with her and how grateful I am that she's taken the time to be with us throughout this year. I miss her today. Wish she could be here, but I wish her all the success.
But I mean, you see things out in Ada County, right? We're not talking about North Idaho where you have a college that's on the verge of losing its accreditation because we've been so uncivil up there, but you have issues in Ada County, including how do we manage our homeless population? How do we allow for an environment where we can help the homeless community, the chronically homeless in particular, get off the streets? How do we have enough space to manage that? How do we learn from the sins of our Western neighbors or from other metro areas that struggle with it? And Diana's been at the forefront of a lot of that. And so I'm sure she'll be back as a guest, but we need to dig into some of those because we like to objectify those who are weaker than us when we're uncivil. And the homeless community is a good example. Attacking higher education is a good example. And there's a lot that we can still talk about from an issues perspective. And those are just two more subjects. So we have our entire schedule built out for next year.
And we're going to kick that off in February, right? So we'll have some time to get planning and really be able to lay out what our viewers can expect from us over 2022 by the time we kick our new year off in February 22. So between now and then, we'd love to hear from the audience about what you would like to see in the program and how you feel about the changes we've discussed so far. And we'll look forward to seeing you then. Is there any closing thoughts on the year before I close out our day for today, you guys?
Just a thank you from me to each of you. I know that you guys probably wondered what in the world I was wanting from the two of you when I invited you in December 2020. But
again,
thank
free
you for
lunch. That's all I thought.
Thank you for making this a reality for me and for Idaho. I've loved working with both of you. I look forward to 2022 and our new guest, whoever we bring on, or host, I should say, the new host that we bring on. I'm glad that we're going to continue this. I think it's an important discussion, and I want to thank you both.
Well, thanks for kicking it off, Kelley. It's been fun to be a part of and looking forward to the next chapter.
Amen.
Matt?
That's all I got. What she said.
Great.
And happy holidays, everyone. Yeah. Hope it's wonderful for everybody.
Yeah. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining us for today's episode, reflecting on the past year. We appreciate you tuning in through the Chamber and our media partners to engage in this community conversation. And we'd like to thank our partners, the Association of Idaho Cities, Smith Malek Attorneys, and the Boise Metro Chamber. Thank you to our media partners, Idaho Ed News and the Idaho Statesman, the Idaho Press, and our incredible presenting sponsors, Doss and Taylor Coffee Roasters and Idaho Central Credit Union. Additionally, thanks to our sponsors, Power Engineers and Ørsted Architects. Thank you for a wonderful year with us. Like I said, we'll be back in 2022 with another edition of In Search of Civility in February. Stay tuned for details. Happy holidays, everyone.
Take care, y'all. See you in 2022.